Welcome to the Intelligent Business Show, a podcast from Aberdeen discussing the latest trends to keep you and your business at the top of your class. And now, here's your host, Aberdeen's CMO in residence, Matthew Grant.
Hello, and welcome to the Intelligent Business Show, the podcast that focuses on the ways that organizations just like yours are using data to make their business more intelligent. I'm your host, Matthew Grant, CMO in residence here at Aberdeen. This week on the show, we're speaking with Pete Gillett, Managing Director at Zuant, a company that provides a platform which helps streamline and standardize mobile data capture. I was curious about the applications of this platform and how it can, among other things, make trade show and event marketing more intelligent. So we invited Pete to the show. Let's dive in. So, Pete, hello, and welcome to the Intelligent Business Show.
Good to be on board.
Yeah, so I'm glad. I just will note for our listeners that you're calling all the way from England, based to the, thanks to the miracle of the telephone.
And good on Skype, which seems to get better and better. So I think the quality sounds better than the normal landlines and things you get these days.
Yeah, no, it's weird. Other podcast I did a few years back, I basically recorded everything via Skype. It was really the easiest way to do it, and could also be cheaper too when you're calling overseas.
Exactly.
Nice. All right, so let's just jump into some of the stuff that you do at Zuant, and particularly around. Well, I wanted to start the conversation really around events. And we'll back our way into your technical solution, but I wanted to start more. Events are a big part of marketing, particularly in the tech world. And in fact, we were just having a conversation here the other day about, do events work? Do they not? How do you track them? All this other stuff. And so I wanted to start out here and just get your perspective on really what's wrong with the traditional approaches that people have taken and currently take still to events?
Well, it never ceases to amaze us that companies will, particularly in the business-to-business space, have the events and trade show part of their marketing budgets being, typically, as much as 60, 70% of the total Marcom budget. Yet, you can go to a show, you'll have a fantastic, maybe a triple-decker booth design. You might have a glass lift on the outside, and it's been specially built for maybe a telco show somewhere, and it's only going to be running there for 3 days, maybe 5 if you're lucky, and yet all of that investment, often millions of dollars, and no one's tracking the visitors. And you go up to one of these booths and say, hey, it looks good, and you start a small talk, chatting to the show workers there, and there's no attempt to really find out who you are or qualify you or know you from Adam. You might be a VIP or just a lowly prospect that's making your first inquiry. So if you're not asking those questions up front, having spent that money, how on earth are you going to get any return on investment analysis and tracking? And I take this back to just a couple of weeks ago, the Exhibitor Live show in Vegas, which we always attend. Fantastic show. And obviously, when we're asking those questions you should ask from visitors to our booth, we'll say, well, how do you capture leads at the moment? And I kid you not, there are 25% of everyone we talk to there. These are event managers coming to an event exhibitor show. 25% use pen and paper still.
Yeah.
So maybe that's much better than nothing, but it shows that this industry, for some reason, and I really don't understand why, when the rest of marketing is all digital and smooth and fast, it's a little sort of backwater that hasn't developed. It's most odd.
Yeah, and it's, well, at least pen and paper is certainly an improvement over the fishbowl full of business cards that you can drop in to get an iPad or something like that.
Sure.
But it sounds like there certainly has been, I guess, speaking of iPads, people we will ask people. I know I've seen it at events. People, can you fill this out, or at least give us your information on the iPad? Or I guess also now you have kind of from the event sponsor, you can rent readers and things like that will zap people's cards and stuff like that. I mean, their name badges and whatnot. Is that still not enough in your mind?
No, it's not enough. I mean, you can rent the lead retrieval devices, which are basically just a barcode scanner.
Yeah.
And if you're lucky, you can just add a couple of questions. But basically, you're just scanning someone's contact details. So it's not much better than a fishbowl.
Right.
Because you've not know where to add that context.
Right.
Is this a sales lead or isn't it? And what are those lovely notes that the sales guys are going to devour afterwards so they can follow up in an appropriate way? Right. So, and of course, dare I mention GDPR?
Right.
There will still be Europeans after Brexit that come to visit shows in the US. Yep. And it is illegal to scan a European person without, obeying those global regulations that apply. So,
right.
GDPR is actually a good thing. I'm not criticizing it in any way because actually it delivers a lot of other stuff. But it should mean that the scanners you rent are going to be obsolete fairly soon.
Yeah, no, because that's one of the things I hadn't even thought about. It's rare. I mean, I guess they formally, hey, you mind if I scan your badge or something like that? But there's certainly no consent, hey, or explanation. This is how the data is going to be used, or any of the sort of things you're going to need to do to be compliant with GDPR.
Yeah.
But I was also thinking, though, as we were talking about this, we've been talking about the data capture element, and as you mentioned, even just scanning barcodes or writing things down or using the fishbowl or even having them fill something out on your iPad, unless it's contextualized, it's still one way in a sense. So there's the big, if you're going to convert or have anything near, not you're going to convert a sale at the booth, but if you're going to have a meaningful interaction that's going to lead to some kind of business result afterwards, you want to try to make that interaction as meaningful as possible, which means there should be some incoming information. Like even if someone fills something out on your iPad and says, "Oh, this is who I am," it feels like the booth workers should suddenly know, "Oh, it's you, Mr. Howell. I'm so glad to see you now, and I wanted to follow up on whatnot." To actually start to make the interaction more personal and also more meaningful in a sense for the visitor, who everyone knows I'm just a lead and fine, I'm going to get an email follow-up or whatever. No one ever feels like, at least when I've been to conferences, Mr. Grant, I'm so happy to see you or whatever. Sure. I know we talked to you a couple of weeks. You haven't really been responding to our emails, but you did respond once and whatever. And so how important do you think that component of this is? Data capture aside, even a two-way flow of data so that you can actually do something with it in real time, it seems kind of important to me.
It is, and it's so easy to do. That's the crazy thing about this. Because, I'm a visitor to other shows where we buy tech stuff for our own businesses and so on, and really there's nothing more annoying than it's not from an arrogance point of view. You don't want to have to be recognized just because of who you are or something. It's just, if you are a reasonable sized customer or someone that is exhibiting, you like to be scanned and be recognized immediately.
Yep.
And your CRM data and records can easily be pulled up instantly when you scan someone. So, that immediately puts you at ease. And because it's so rare that happens, right, you think, wow, no, we have got a good relationship here. Let's spend a little bit of time and explore doing business. It's just so easy to do. And it's just having a good digital platform that has that CRM data on it. It has the latest scanning. It has content it can share immediately, so you don't wait for a couple of months until after the show. And if you want a phone call from that company on Friday at 3 p.m. when you're back from your trip, you can schedule it. I mean, that's how we like to be treated by people we're buying products from, I think.
Right. And I mean, and it's also becoming more and more common, obviously, just in our daily lives and our lives as consumers. And I think something people have been talking about for a long time is our experience in the consumer world, and even with the consumer electronics, more and more starts to set our expectations for even interactions at a B2B tech trade show, which can be pretty far from, going into Neiman Marcus or something. But so I'm curious, so on this personalization front, do you have any stories about, so we've talked, as I wanted to say, we've talked about what people do wrong, what's kind of seems kind of old-fashioned or just not, it's just sort of thoughtless in a certain way about how people approach these things. But so can we talk about the other side? Like, where have you seen, or do you have stories of people doing it right and creating this kind of personal experience, personalized experience when people are visiting their booths at trade shows or events?
Yes, sure. And, because of the capacity you now got on not just iPads, but iPhones now, the amount of storage you have available, means that you can easily have 1 million CRM records on your app ready, so that when you scan someone, so we have a construction client, for instance, and on a country by country basis at particular trade shows that they're exhibiting at, immediately you scan someone, it will provide a match, and that's a fuzzy match, because the stuff you register with for a show often isn't that accurate compared to what you might put on your business card. So it will do a fuzzy match, gives you a pretty good chance of finding your name if you're on the CRM database, and it will then not only show you whether, show the show worker, the sales guy, whether you're a customer, a prospect, VIP, maybe you're a journalist, whoever you are. And if you are a customer, what products you have, what other brands you have. And it even goes as far as, your personal interests. And if it's a football team, what team it is, so that you can just engage. And you can just look, particularly on an iPad, you've just got a little panel and it just shows you that information immediately. And you can glance down and make no excuse to say, oh, good, no, I can see this, that, and the other on my screen here, and then engage properly. So we have I have to say, it's only a few clients that operate that way. Right. But that will be the future. It's just how quickly other companies adopt that. And those that do will have a really big competitive advantage, I think.
Yeah. I mean, you're painting a picture of what can be, in fact, what's technically possible now. And it's the sort of thing, I think, right, there'll be a few early adopters who kind of get it. But at a certain point, again, I think it's the booth visitor and their expectations are going to start driving it, because that's, again, it mirrors the kind of experience you can have certainly online, where the site recognizes you and personalizes the experience, and that's just bleeding more and more into the real world, so-called. But it makes me realize, though, as you were talking about the 1 million CRM records you can store and other data you could store on a mobile device, that part of like making this vision real means your kind of preparation in the run-up to an event actually needs to be a little different, or at least have a real data component. Like, you have to get your data house in order prior to the event if you're going to actually successfully personalize interactions with people who are going to be coming at you, in a sense, more or less randomly.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, because, that's the practical reason why this stuff isn't happening much. And, that's in particularly large companies. Yep. You'll have an event manager or maybe 10 event managers, because you've got 20 events running every month, and it's just, remorseless, that push you go from event to event. And they're hard work, and there's a lot to set up, and there are always snags and all sorts of things that the poor event manager has to do. So they're going from event to event. If they deliver a good-looking booth, everyone's happy, they move on. There isn't an ROI aspect to their particular job role, typically.
Right.
So the companies where this works, you not only got the event managers working with marketing, and they're starting to look, a big show, you're looking 2 years out before a show,
right,
where you'll have a planning committee, and which is easier to do these days on web meetings and sharing technology and so on.
Yep.
And you'll have a countdown towards that event. And actually, it's not just events managers and marketing roles, but also getting the sales teams involved as well. Because if you've got this triple-decker booth with a glass lift running up the side of it, as you scan someone, you can then say, right, that's a VIP, or it's someone from media, let's take them up to the third floor and we'll have a hospitality area there and we can sit down and talk business and so on. So actually assigning records to different categories of invitation, and so that when you scan them, you know who they are and what should happen to them. That's a really big marketing automation play.
Yep.
And the tools are there to manage all of this stuff. So those successful companies, those few that really do this well, they'll have events operating with marketing and with sales together.
Yeah.
And as we know, just getting sales and marketing to talk to each other is hard enough. So getting this sort of tripartite agreement might even be easier than Brexit, but who knows?
Who knows? So actually, though, what you're making me think about here is, again, I think, right, there's the event people who, in a sense, their goal is make it happen. And then the marketer's role is, okay, capture as many leads as possible. And the salespeople, what their mandate is, get meetings at the, prior to the event, set up meetings so those are happening, and then, find targets of opportunity and take advantage of them when you're there. But it sounds like what you're talking about is you can actually get more strategic and facilitate your strategy, or kind of operationalize your strategy with the data platform if you've thought about, okay, kind of almost applied a logic to it. So we know these, if we set up meetings, we've got those, but we also know we're going to be able to capitalize on visits to our booth itself. So now what we need to do is create logic around, like you were saying, if someone from this account shows up, we need to do this. If this specific person shows up, we need to do this. If these types of people show up, here's our other thing. So again, it feels like it starts to kind of remove a lot of the guesswork and also the kind of moment-to-moment decision-making calls that a lot of times your booth workers have to make, and starts to rationalize the whole thing and actually align it with strategy, so you could actually start talking in a real way about ROI. Or am I overblowing this whole thing? I know maybe I'm getting too excited about it.
No, exactly. And those good companies, if we call them that, will just use the trade show as the sort of fulcrum point in the middle of this whole process. So if it started the year, 18 months before, then, particularly in business to business with big deals to do and millions of dollars involved, you'll be then tracking those leads afterwards for another 18 months, 2 years.
Yep.
And, they'll be off down different tracks, and the sales guys are busy doing the instant deals, but there'll be a whole call center, inside sales unit that's working the other ones, delivering content. The trade show is just one little point within this whole process. It's real active digital business to business marketing, if you like.
Yeah, no, nice. So I wanted to swing back, since you had mentioned GDPR and this data privacy component of things. So we're talking about mobile data capture and also back and forth, even then based on that, pulling other data from your systems and things like that. But, now, obviously, when you're dealing with people's personal data or collecting personal data from them, we need to be mindful of what are the regulations that apply there. So what are, even if someone, as people become more smarter, let's say, around how they're dealing with their booths and events and the data they're collecting and their interactions with visitors, what are the things they need to watch out for so they're not running afoul of EU regulations, or even, here in the United States, we have even state-by-state regulations about this type of thing. So, what do people need to do to not fall afoul of that stuff?
Sure. No, I mean, I know, in the US, most people would think, well, what's GDPR got to do with us? But the new laws coming in California, I think it's May next year, were very similar. And what happens in California often spreads to other states, doesn't it, fairly quickly? So it's a good time to address this. And although people like to make fun of GDPR and raise their eyes to the sky when anyone ever mentions it, actually it's a good set of regulations, and one of the best set that we've seen out of the EU, and it just means that the data you're handling just needs to be looked after and protected, and there's a lot of work to do that correctly. And I would think that very few large organizations, even in Europe at the center of the action, are fully compliant, because it's so hard to actually, if you ran a data audit, where is your name and your personal contact details? Where are they held within a company that you work with, whether it's your car insurance, home insurance, or anything else? It might be on lots of spreadsheets all over the place. And so that's very difficult. So we think it's good to have that framework, and the one area, obviously, that affects us a lot is the mobile aspect, because, again, in where you've got salespeople dealing with the customers, a lot of them don't have company phones anymore. They bring your own device, and they just load the apps that they need for business, and it's a personal phone as well. But of course, it's not often or very rarely mentioned that personal data that you're holding on your mobile phone, must comply to GDPR. If you've got someone's personal details because you've just had a sales visit, let's have some sort of framework so that they do be happy to have your details on their mobile phones. Yeah. So, our own business at Zuant, we've spent 3 years coming up with a process for managing that mobile data. Yeah. And it means that you can ask someone once, they can opt in. There's a really nice preference center. Yes, I'm happy if you got my data. I don't want you to phone me. I'm happy for emails, even text. You can go have a really good preference center and actually want to receive information about these products or these markets, but not those. So it's a nice way as consumers to be treated. But the clever bit then is making sure that those settings not only are held at the center, but they're rolled out and managed on multiple mobile devices. And, a large corporation might have as many as 10,000 or more reps out there around the world with all this data. So that's the real clever bit. So when someone gives you those preferences, you've got it on your phone, and then it miraculously appears on everyone else's phones in that organization. Yeah. And if there are any changes, you've got a clever system that waits, because a lot of these devices will be offline. You can't just say, delete that record or amend this record. You have to wait until they go online, make those changes, and report back at the center and say, the system's made the change. Yeah. So there's some very clever tech in the background to allow you to comply, and that all comes from experience in the events trade show world, and then spreads nicely out to salespeople who are on the road and needs to do this sort of stuff.
Yeah. Which actually, as we kind of round the bend into the end of the podcast here, I thought, can we follow that path a little farther in the sense that, collecting data on mobile devices, obviously, we've talked a lot about how you can do that and why it's necessary and what the benefits are in the event context. But yeah, as you were just saying, it feels like there are a lot of other use cases where you want to have a smart device or a smart way, I guess, as a sales rep, for example, to not only collect information, but again, get information back in the moment so that you can actually say the right thing or provide the right content to whoever it is you're talking to at the time. So is that the sort of thing that you guys are also looking at as you kind of expand out beyond the event world?
Yes, for sure. Exactly that. And, a sales visit to a company when you're on the road is very similar to the sales discussion you might have, in the booth at a busy trade show. So,
yeah, for sure.
It's exactly the same application, really. You need CRM data, you need content to present. You want a sort of Swiss Army knife of an app that you just open up and, right, you're pitching this particular product for this market. It's all there, and you connect your iPhone to someone's TV in the boardroom, and off you go.
Yeah.
So all of the same data capture, scanning business cards, obviously, rather than scanning a badge.
Right.
It's the sort of standard process when it's a sales guy on the road.
Yep.
But all the GDPR opt-in, the thank you emails as you sit in the car park waiting to go off to your next meeting. It's identical. It's just, per person.
Right.
And all the same rules apply.
Yeah. I was wondering too, actually, just because it's been on my mind lately here, it seems like there's also like a mobile service like application here, for example. So for companies that have large service fleets, they're not exactly salespeople, right? Because they're going out to like fix someone's problem or address their asset or machine that needs help. But A, there's data capture that needs to happen there. B, you do need to have updates, or sometimes you need to be able to plug into a knowledge management system so you can deal with the problem that you're confronting and things like that. I'm thinking a little too expansively about this, but it seems like where you're headed with this actually ends up as we have a total more and more mobile workforce. As you said, there's the BYOD kind of world, bringing your own device and having something that makes all those devices connected to the same system. It seems like there's a lot of the potential here to make a lot of these interactions more intelligent based on the platform you're using. Or am I just wrong?
Sure. No, you're totally right. And, because we get asked for all sorts of weird and wonderful applications. We've got one going to Heathrow Airport at the moment for the service engineers, and there are thousands of these guys just living in that airport world that are almost disconnected from the real world. And, something goes wrong behind the scenes with a conveyor belt for your automated suitcase distribution to an aircraft or something. They can just snap a picture of that problem. And it's like, instead of scanning a badge, you've got a picture and you put the notes in. Instead of sales notes, it's no conveyor sprocket 365 in unit B's gone down, and it just goes back to the center and off they go and fix it. So it's just, you can just do so much with these devices now. And the same will be true in retail. We've got a few applications there. If you're queuing in Neiman Marcus or whatever, that isn't the application, but it's similar to that. While you're queuing to pay, well, why not go onto an iPad Pro in a kiosk and say, actually, I want to be on that newsletter to hear about new products for that new watch range or the new Nike products, and just add yourself to newsletters and send yourself information while you're waiting. So sort of the opposite of Minority Report. It's more consumer demand to go and grab information rather than being pushed remorselessly at you.
Yeah. Though I also see too, even for floor walkers or people who, are just work on the floor in retail environment, even to have that kind of access, especially to a repeat customer or something like that, and be able to even be a little more personalized in your Rex to them. Now it's fascinating stuff. So, and it's so much potential. All right, Pete, that's all the time that we have today. So I just wanted to thank you once again for joining us here on the Intelligent Business Show.
No, thank you very much. I can't believe 30 minutes has flown by so quickly, but plenty to talk about, and I've enjoyed today. It's been a pleasure.
Nice. Thank you. Thanks for listening, everybody. Next week, we'll be talking with Harvard professor Jeffrey Schnapp about media, design, and the visual arts. You won't want to miss it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Intelligent Business Show. You can find this show on iTunes and Spotify, as well as on YouTube. And be sure to follow us on Twitter at Aberdeen_show. And if you want to know what's going on in your market space, be sure to check out Aberdeen.com.